Florida State lands a big-time offensive lineman on Independence Day.
You are Locked On Seminoles, your daily podcast on the Florida State Seminoles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Back into Locked On Seminoles. I am your host, Brian Smith. Thank you to the everydayers that make this a great show. You can find us wherever you get your podcast for free and on YouTube. Part of the awesome Locked On Network, your team every day. Today's episode starts off and features offensive line recruit Peyton Joseph, who just committed to the Noles. Florida State has been recruiting him ardently for a long time. The irony, at one point, he was a Florida commitment, but now Peyton Joseph out of Houston County in Warner Robins, Georgia, is a part of the 2025 Florida State Seminoles recruiting class. He is offensive lineman number 2. We are going to break down what he is about, where Florida State stands with O-line recruiting, kind of look at the past in the last 4 or 5 years, and what is next here on Locked On Seminoles. Today's show is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Peyton Joseph is an interior offensive lineman, 280, 290 pounds. This is a young man that has the athleticism to get out in space in the screen game. He can be an edge guy in the zone game, and above all else, he just has good feet. If you have good feet, and you got the natural power this guy has, I'll talk about that in a moment, there's a chance. You cannot win in today's major college football game without really good feet. You used to be able to just have a couple guys that were grinders on the inside. Those days are over, especially with Mike Norvell's offense. They like to pull and trap. They also like to run screens to the receivers and throw to the backs. You must be mobile and be able to play at the second and even the third level, meaning the linebackers and the defensive backs. Peyton Joseph has that physical ability. He plays in the central Georgia area at Warner Robins, at Houston County. This is a program that's going against top competition. Central Georgia is loaded with talent, a lot of big bodies, so he's used to smashing up against guys that are also very large. It's not going to be as big a jump for him, and that's why the state of Georgia is so important. It almost seems like I say this every single show, but it just can't be stated enough. Florida State's long-term success, you got to recruit Florida. That's the given. But the next state they got to hammer is Georgia. Bowden made a living off of it. There's no reason that this staff shouldn't, and they've done a great job with it. Here's another example. So Georgia is a state that is a lineman-built state in the trenches. Georgia and Alabama recruit there heavily. Florida State does. Florida, Ohio State, Notre Dame, Michigan. All these schools recruit there for a reason, and it's kids like Joseph. Now, here's the thing that I'm curious about. Will he end up at guard or at center? It's always hard to find centers. If you can find a guy that can snap and help read the defense, set the line protections, especially against a team that stunts or makes late movements, that's hard. I'm curious to see if he can do it because he's athletic enough. That I am quite sure of. But at the same time, that's something you got to want to take on. It's an extra responsibility to not only be assigned to getting the football to the quarterback, but to make sure a blitz doesn't get to the A-gap and kill that quarterback on the next play. So something to consider. As far as the rankings and everything that comes along with him coming out of Houston County, here is what we have. On 3 has him as the 224th player in the country, the number 14 interior offensive lineman, and 27th player in the state of Georgia. 24/7 has him 133rd, 7th and 17th. ESPN 152nd, 3rd and 26th. Rivals does not have them in their 250, but he is the 15th interior offensive lineman and 32nd player in the state of Georgia. Now, he is the second offensive lineman committed to the Noles. The other one is likely to play along the interior as well, and that's Solomon Thomas, arguably the best interior offensive lineman in the class of 2025. He is out of Raines High School in Jacksonville, Florida, national recruit. Everybody recruits Solomon. Most everybody recruit Peyton too. That combination, going back, and I'll go into this a little bit here in about 5 minutes, but that combination is the best 1-2 punch based on what I've seen live, based on what I've seen on film, based on what I know from other people, and just based on the rankings. It's lock, stock, and barrel. Florida State's best 1-2 punch on the interior they've signed since before the year 2020. I'm going to go over 2020 to modern day, how they've recruited on the offensive line here in a couple minutes, but period, it's the best interior duo they're going to have. Again, I don't know if Peyton's going to play center or guard. Maybe he'll play a little of both, but I think that Florida State has hit the home run there. Now, should they take another one? That's debatable. Florida State is recruiting some other guys that I'll talk about later, but if you can get a great interior player, I think that's okay. But at this point, unless it's flat out, no doubt about it, an elite player, you want to take tackles over interior players almost every time because it's just harder to find. More length is the reason why. Florida State had several guys in the month of June visit. I don't think they're going to get most of the guys they wanted. That's unfortunate. We'll see, but I've been wrong about some of the recruits here to date. That's for certain. Maybe they'll surprise some people, but the Texas kids, I don't think they're going to get those guys. They may have to circle back on somebody or find another kid and or go to the portal. But if they can just get one tackle in this class to go with the two kids they got, they'd be in good shape. But unless they land an elite kid, I think they should be looking at the portal and the junior college ranks because Florida State's elevated its offensive line recruiting. And I've been harping on this for a long time, and it's coming to fruition. Last year's class, and again, I'll talk about the numbers in a second, was a start. This year's class is the first time that I remember in a very long time where Florida State was just in on the elite guys. And if you're not in on them, you don't get them to visit. Obviously, you have no shot. They're missing on some of them, but you're going to miss for elite players because the competition's higher. That's cool. At least you were in the running. Prior years, a lot of times, Florida State didn't get the top kids even on campus for an unofficial visit, let alone official. And I'm talking specifically about offensive line. They've just done a better job. I'm sure winning had something to do with it. Of course, the 2023 season, it should have something to do with it, or else you're recruiting the wrong young men to come to your play for your football program. Florida State has found those kids, and just about everybody else does too. The kids, we're talking about a tackle, they have the Texas offers, the Georgias, the Michigans, those kinds of things. It's an elite group, but now it's time to finish and be very particular. Florida State does not have to take flyers on kids like they had in previous classes. That's really, really important to note because for years, Florida State was held down overall as a program, especially before the portal came open like it is now, where you had immediate eligibility, because they just couldn't block enough people up front. Like they played Clemson, they played teams that had really good defensive linemen. They struggled. Now it's gotten better with the portal and high school recruiting, and it's kind of coming together where they're going to need the portal less and less. It's a great situation for Florida State football. Next up, I'm going to talk about where Florida State was. We're going to get more specific on that and kind of project towards the end what is left for Florida State. And there's one particular guy in particular that I think is really important that they get. He could play inside or out. That is next on Locked On Seminoles. Are you tired of looking for tickets to a concert, to a music event, maybe a baseball game, like going to see the Braves or going to see the Marlins, whoever it may be, and it's hard to find good prices on tickets, especially last minute? Gametime is an app that you can use right from your phone. Type in the name of the team, and you can get there very, very quickly. A couple of clicks, and you can see exactly what opportunities are there for you, all in one pricing. So you know the final price, not just the front price without the fees and the taxes. You get to find out up front. All of those things you can find on Gametime. And they've got zone deals, flash deals, and the closer that you get to the time of the event, the better the opportunities are for you to get a price that is manageable and actually decreasing instead of increasing. So make sure you check out Gametime. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets or anything else with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right. Next up, where was Florida State specifically? I went back and looked at the numbers using the 24/7 sports recruiting rankings just to give a barometer how Florida State has taken players into their offensive line room, where they are, how successful it's been, etc. We're going to break that down just by the numbers. It's just bottom line, who'd they sign? Has it worked? And to be honest, it's been a little disappointing until here recently. Starting in 2020, we'll go there. We'll just move back to modern day through chronological order. 20s class had 4 kids on the offensive line. None of them were 4 or 5 star recruits. Not a good sign. 2021, 2 guys, only one was a 4-star. 22, 6 guys, so they certainly went all in. 2 of them were 4-star. 2023, only 2 guys again, 1 4-star. This past class, they had 1 4-star and 4 total players. And so far, now that they have Peyton Joseph, you're talking about 2 offensive line recruits, but both of them are good enough to be 4-star recruits. So here's the question. Can Florida State do this yearly? Because obviously they've elevated. I'll get into specific names here in 1 second. Can they do this consistently? Because if they do, historically, O-line's the spot they struggle to recruit elite players, not numbers, elite players. This goes back into the 80s and the 90s. When Florida State would lose a big game, whether it was against Florida, Miami, or Notre Dame, most often they got beat up front. Period. When your quarterback's running for his life, it's not good. They had some really good offensive linemen, don't get me wrong. And it's pretty hard to beat some of the other positions FSU had, linebacker, DB, receiver. I mean, they were most spots for most of them were elite. But most often the weakest spot was up front. If they can conquer that now, it's really not changed that much, and they can be consistent up front, again, with high school recruiting improving, you're talking about a program that should be top 10 every year, barring, injury at quarterback, something like that you can't control. There's no reason for Florida State not to be ranked in the top 10 preseason polls every year. They got a staff that's committed, a head coach that wants to be there. They've got their culture built. There's nothing left. This was the one spot I was worried about the most because you need a lot of numbers and a lot of high-end talent because it's really hard to project. The recruiting's improved a lot, and they're still doing a really good job with the portal too. Kind of hard to go against what Florida State's doing. So let's talk about some of the guys they had, looking at these players that they took. 2020, probably the best guy out of that group, wasn't a great class by any means, was Robert Scott. I would not be surprised, and again, just up to him, if he came back for an extra year. Next year will be the last year from that COVID year, that a kid could play a 6th year. Robert Scott could be your offensive tackle on the left or right side in 25. It's possible. 22, Jalen Early, he had 46 snaps last year. Julian Armella had 46 snaps. A couple of guys that are pretty good players. Those kids both have a chance to break into the lineup in 25. They're pretty good. We'll see. They were both kids that were pretty highly recruited. In 23, Lucas Simmons was the more highly recruited kid, but Andre Otto out of Key West actually got 5 snaps, and Simmons didn't play. Both of them are 300-pounders that can play tackle. Otto could probably play guard as well. This past class, Jonathan Daniels is a kid that I got to see. He's out of Pensacola, Florida. That's an area Florida State's obviously always going to recruit. I think he'll have a chance to play guard or tackle. It doesn't matter, but he's very athletic and light on his feet. Just needs to add weight. The other guy that was actually ranked higher by some of the services, including 24/7 Sports, Manasi Itate. I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, but I looked it up. He is not just massive, but like when he walks out on the field, you're like, holy cow. He's 330, give or take. I'm not sure if he's going to play tackle, but that's what he played in high school. He's very raw. He waits too much for guys to come to him instead of attacking. He's got to work on his kick step and whatnot, but he's an athlete. Like he played nose guard and just threw guys around and just, bull in a china shop. A lot of upside. I think he's more of an interior guy if I had to guess, but he has incredible athleticism and they're going to change his body. He might lose weight instead of gain, and he'll certainly change the way his frame is. Itate, that's his name, Itate. I don't think there's any doubt that when you get kids like this, you're going to miss once in a while, but if he's got the want to, can't teach the size. So that's a kid that was probably about as highly ranked as anybody in the class of 24 for their O-line, depending on the service, but 24/7 had him the highest. He's out of Modesto, California. And then again, this year, Solomon Thomas is out of Rains High School in Jacksonville, elite 5-star kid, period. And then Josh Petty's a kid they're trying to get in today. They got Peyton Joseph. Petty's the kid, since we just mentioned it, I'm going to talk about him in a second in a little more light. But if you've got 2 guys already here. Do you get a JUCO kid? Do you add another high school kid? Because right now, looking at the offensive linemen that Florida State has committed, they're good, but they need at least one big-time tackle. Just pure, unadulterated, big-time tackle. And they're not leading for any of them. This is my concern, and it's every year for every team. There's only a handful of these guys. 6'6", long as a tree, super athletic, naturally, physically ready. to go to the next level and compete in the weight room and be like maybe 1 year away from playing, being your left tackle or whatever. There's 5 to 8 of those kids a year, something like that. Florida State's in on several of them, but right now they're not leading for any of them, to my knowledge, like what I have been told. I don't expect them to get in. Lamont Rogers is one of them. I know there's a couple other kids. That's one kid off the top of my head. From what I was told, Missouri might be the school that ends up with him. Ty Hayward, Oklahoma might be the guy. He's out of Denton, which is the Dallas area. Those kids are really, really good. If Florida State could get one of those, and they could also add, big if, but right now I think they will, if they could also add Josh Petty, if for those you don't know, his sister's going to go to Florida State, that would be great. He's another Georgia kid. He's from the Roswell area on the north side of Atlanta, plays at Fellowship Christian. He's a kid that can play guard or tackle. I'm not sure what's best. Georgia likes him better inside, maybe at center. I'm not sure where Florida State would play him. It's a different scheme. But I don't consider him a pure tackle. They need to find a pure tackle. Having a class without a single guy that you're definitively going to play on the outside on the offensive line gives me pause, and it probably gives their offensive line coach pause too. So Florida State needs to find one of those, even if it's a kid that's going to take a little longer to develop, but he has the length that you're looking for, 6'6", 6'7" kid. But last year, again, they got 2 guys that could possibly play it, and I'm pretty sure Daniels will. In the class before, Simmons and Otto could probably be there. So they're not in a terrible spot. You just want to have more bullets in the gun. That's all I'm really saying. Florida State's in a pretty good spot. Now, before I move on and we get into what's next for Florida State, long-term, what I'm looking for, one other note. You still got to remember where Florida State was compared to now. They have improved so much up front from an offensive line recruiting standpoint. It's just insane. Because for the longest time, Florida State's offensive line recruiting left much, much to be desired. So be careful for what you ask, because sometimes, you get pretty good players and it's better than the holes they were getting, because like that 6-member class a few years ago, like 4 of them weren't even on campus anymore. You need to have guys that get it done in some capacity, even if they have to move inside. They didn't make it a tackle, whatever. They've had too many guys that just flat out were busts at Florida State and transferred out. Injuries don't help, etc. But they got to hit more. They started to now. Now we're going to finalize. So that's next on Locked On Seminoles, what they can do to finish as an offensive line unit moving forward. Florida State is close. Close. But close is not good enough. This is not horseshoes and hand grenades. They have moved the needle quite a bit in O-line recruiting, and hats off to the staff for doing that. To finalize, not only do we have to see them land at least 1, if not 2 offensive tackles every year that are pretty much the elite. There are about 5 schools that get all. It's almost more selective than the defensive tackle group in the nation. But they also have to be able to finish with those guys, meaning develop them. D-line hits higher than O-line in terms of projections. Year to year, anyway. Most years you'll see that. O-line and then quarterback, those 2 spots are the hardest to project. It's very difficult. Tight ends up there too. A lot of that has to do with injuries. But at the same time, tackle, you can see the feet. It really just comes down to whether that young man has the ability. So if this were me, and obviously this is hypothetical, I obviously don't work for Florida State's football program, I would find a tackle, even if it's a JUCO kid. I want a tackle in every single class, period. 1 is still not enough, but 0 is a catastrophe possibly down the road. You don't want to have a national title kind of team and not have a single tackle that's a senior. I want as many seniors on my O-line every single year as possible. I know recruits don't want to hear that, but freshmen and sophomores on the offensive line at any school is usually a recipe for a disaster. 3rd, 4th, and 5th year players, period. If you got a kid like Solomon Thomas that's good enough to play as a sophomore, an exception to the rule kind of guy, fantastic. Again, that's exception, not the rule. Thomas is arguably the best offensive lineman in the country. He's committed to Florida State. I'm sure he'll play early. He is a monster. Great. Don't count him as what you would expect long-term for any program, the Noles included. So I would either get a JUCO kid. You got to find somebody that maybe it's a big tight end, 6'6", 260 kid that can move over to tackle. It's got great feet. Whatever it is, they have to get at least 1. Secondary part of this, I still think as good as Florida State does with evaluating the transfer portal, why would you stop? At least evaluate and take 1, if not 2 guys in the portal, even if you get Josh Petty. That's a young man that I think is really good, But again, it depends on how they want to use him. Does he end up at tackle? Does he end up at guard? Does he end up at center? Like Georgia likes him at center. I mean, everybody's got their own recipe for success, but Georgia wants a completely different kind of offensive lineman, except for Petty. Every other kid they're pretty much recruiting is almost 310 or 320 or above. Zaire Addison, another kid Florida State recruited, is one of those. I know some people think he still might flip to Florida State, but I highly doubt it. I was with him the other day. He's probably going to stick with Oregon. I just think that Florida State has to find at least one more guy, if not two, in this class. Again, how the combination works out, I don't know. But Petty can't be a guarantee there because he's only 250-ish on what he weighs right now. He's got a lot of weight that he's got to add. We'll see. The other part, and this is the final, how do some of these young guys develop? They might have to take more than one portal guy for sure, because some of the kids I mentioned today, somebody might get hurt, somebody might transfer, or somebody might want to stick around, but they're just not that good. They didn't develop. You never know. O-line recruiting is really, really hard. If you can't see them like the second and third year players by the middle of this season, if you've got a whole bunch of guys, you're like, I don't know, especially if that's tackle, that's a problem. You got to go out no matter what it kills you to do. But in the portal, you got to overspend. It's the way it is. You got to get somebody. Because Florida State next year, I think, will be in a position to compete for a national title. The 25 team, I think, will be better than this one personally. And you don't want to be in the spot where, like, okay, we're going against a team that's got two edge rushers. We're not sure about our tackles. That can't happen. I think Florida State will be good, but you might have one or two of your guys move on. You might have one or two of your guys get hurt. You need depth at tackle, experienced depth. I still would look at least one portal guy or JUCO guy, at minimum, probably two. Just got to have the juniors, seniors, and fifth-year seniors. Look what it's done for Florida State the last couple of years. It's really helped them in big games, especially in pass protection. So with that, just something to think about. O-line recruiting for Florida State is on the rise. They're getting better. Peyton Joseph is another guy they just added out of the state of Georgia. So it's a good day. And again, happy Independence Day to everybody out there. Please like and subscribe this video and make sure that you share it with whoever you can. Comment on YouTube. Love to hear from you. Everybody have a great day, and thank you very much.